How are you? What's up? It's I, the OG. I'm playing around with YouTube Live. This may work. This may not work. Oh no. It's been a while since we've taken a walk and just, I guess you call this a podcast, just ASMR, just talked about whatever's on the top of our heads with no particular direction. Just thought you'd need some nice walk to the market, enjoy the outsides, take a break from the weirdness and the anger of the world, and talk about P. No, not that kind of P. Properties, specifically intellectual properties, specifically can I run a game using an intellectual property? What's an intellectual property? For those of you who don't know, Star Wars. You cannot get much more intellectually property than maybe Star Wars. So as the OGGM Adventures grows and adapts to the recent changes in the world, I thought I'd start focusing more on other games. 5 years ago, but I feel like it's time to evolve, right? I set the standard, now it's time to change the standard. So I thought it'd be interesting to start focusing more on other games besides Dungeons and Dragons. And when you think other games, consciously or unconsciously, we sort of just make the jump to, can I run established universe? Can I run intellectual property? Can I run Middle Earth? Can I run Star Wars? Can I run Gotham? Of course you can. There's nothing to say you can't. The only question is if you try and publish stuff in those settings. And even a lot of those settings have rules set up for third-party people to publish stuff. The big question when running a intellectual property is, can I run Star Wars? Or can't I run Star Wars? The big question is, how do I do it justice, right? What do I do as the DM if I run onto somebody who knows more about the intellectual property than I do? Which is, every time I ran Star Wars was a thing, there would inevitably be one person at the table who always knew more about Star Wars than I did. And I thought I knew a lot about Star Wars, but there'd always be that one guy, you know, the stereotype, the guy would be like, no, actually, in episode 3, what the Empire did was, so how do you deal with that? Because it doesn't matter how much research you do. Chances are, if you're running Middle Earth, sooner or later, you're going to run into somebody who knows more about Middle Earth than you do. So what do you do? Well, thankfully, just because there are these signpost moments in the universe of those intellectual properties, doesn't mean you can't mess around with the stuff that isn't, you know, to the tertiary of those signpost moments, right? I mean, you could run the Fellowship of the Ring and see if your players do it differently. Or there's plenty of other stuff going on. So to use Star Wars, again, you know, can you run a game of Star Wars using that intellectual property, knowing that there's a chance that you're going to run into people who know more about intellectual property than you do? Sure, just don't center it around the signpost stories. The characters will always be tertiary. Look at Taz and Bink, the Taz and Bink comic books. You know, look at what they're doing with The Mandalorian. Tertiary to the movies. Look what they're doing with like the cartoons, like Rebels or Rogue One. Tertiary to the main story, but still stuff going on. There's huge gaps of time where we still don't know a lot of what's going on. There's still huge gaps of time that, you know, depending upon what day of the week again it is, whether the books are canon or not canon, whether the cartoons are canon or not canon, whether the comic books are canon or not canon. So there's a lot to mess around with. So don't be afraid to dip your toes in the pool of any intellectual property. You can do it. There's no rule that says you cannot run a Star Wars game. There's nobody saying you cannot run a Middle Earth game. And there's nobody saying you cannot run a game in the Star Wars universe that has very little to do with the movie universe, or, you know, there's nothing saying you know, there's huge gaps of time in the Lord of the Rings where we don't know what's going on. There's huge gaps of time. It's like 75 years between the time Bilbo comes back to the Shire and the time Frodo finally leaves. That's a lot of time just there alone, where stuff could be going on that doesn't directly affect these signpost events. There's a huge, huge galaxy around Star Wars. And in the movies, we only ever see like what, 4 planets? 4 or 5 planets, right? Inevitably Tatooine. So yeah. There's plenty of stories you could tell in Middle Earth. There's plenty of stories you could tell in Star Wars. Plenty of stories you can tell in the Marvel, DC, whatever established, published universe game that you want to run without stepping on the toes of the prime story time, and without making feel like the guy who does know more than you do, like you're punishing him, like you're picking on him, or like, you know, doesn't matter how much you know about Star Wars, ha ha ha, I'm running something completely different. No, it's great that you know this stuff, and if that stuff comes in handy when you get to something that's related to your knowledge, great. But understand that the Star Wars game I'm going to run has very little to do with the Skywalker trilogy, right? It might take place before Phantom Menace. It might take place during the timeline of the cartoons of Clone Wars and Rebels. It might take place in the gaps, you know, between the movies. You know, how much time passed between New Hope and Empire? How much time passed between Empire and Jedi? How much time passes between the end of Jedi and the start of the Rey cycle? You know, how much time passes between New Hope? You know, we know Rogue One leads right into New Hope, but we don't know what was going on before Rogue One. So there's plenty of timelines to mess around with. Publishing, because I know inevitably somebody's asking that. Can I publish a product based in these settings? If there is already a pre-existing role-playing game using that universe, probably. I would check to see if there is an SRD open license for the Star Wars stuff, which is currently owned by Edge Studios. I would check to see if there is an established open license for you to publish third-party stuff for the people who own the Middle-earth license, and I don't know who owns that anymore because it just switched again. But, you know, we know that they're at least Free League has an SRD open source, so you could make stuff third-party for them. I'm assuming the other ones do. I don't know about Modiphius and Star Trek. I know it's close, but yeah. Definitely the possibility exists. Hi. Now, if you want to publish something for a new established IP that hasn't been done to death by game companies, like currently nobody's doing anything with the DCU game-wise, well, that's questionable because of, you know, Warner Brothers, what Warner Brothers does own and doesn't own. On the other hand, if you were thinking of writing a DCU book, Batman and Superman are about to enter the public domain. DC will not have the copyright to them anymore. Shortly coming up. Of course, they could renew it, but as of now, they haven't yet. So that's to say, what about ones that have never, you know, I don't know, what's an IP that's never, ever been turned to a game? I'm sure there is one. I would say, no, that was been turned. No, that's been turned. Battlestar Galactica? Was there a Battlestar Galactica role-playing game? I know there's a bunch of Battlestar Galactica board games. I don't remember if there was a Battlestar Galactica role-playing game. So, bam, could I do that? Could I run a Battlestar Galactica centered campaign and then publish it? Don't know. You would have to get in contact with the people who currently own the copyright to all the images and all the lore from Battlestar Galactica. See if any of it is public domain, see if anything is it something you have to pay for, see if they're willing to work with you. But if there's, it doesn't mean it's not completely impossible if you want to milk an IP that hasn't been milked yet. Also, there's plenty of IPs that are public domain that you could still use. Lovecraft stuff, right? Conan, sort of public domain. Sherlock Holmes, Dracula, Frankenstein, public domain. These are all public domain characters. So you could make a Frankenstein adventure and publish a Frankenstein adventure and not worry about Universal coming after you, as long as you don't use their specific take on Frankenstein. If your Frankenstein is completely original, then yeah. Same with the Star Wars shit. There's plenty of time, cycle back to Star Wars, plenty of time periods where there's stuff going on that you could set adventures that in no way, shape, or form affects the Mayan storyline. There's also plenty of characters that you can mess around with that aren't set in stone. If you want to enter in, you know, if you want to create a new Sith Lord named Darth Peanut Butter and Jelly Sandwich, you can, as long as you follow whatever the rules of the company who currently owns the rights to Star Wars, Disney, and Edge Games, to publish that. If Disney has said these are the things you can use in making Star Wars themed product, and you go to the Edge Games website and they have a Common Core SRD open source that says yes, you can make product set in the Star Wars universe as long as you do X, Y, and Z, and you follow all those, there's absolutely nothing to say. Then there's nothing saying you can't run that game, publish that game, create a brand new Sith Lord that is unique to your game, as long as you understand it's a third party and not, you know. And maybe if, you know, if Edge actually thinks it's so amazing that they buy it, then you can say, hey, I created a canon Star Wars character. At least until the Disney changes the canon again. But yeah. Okay. So yeah, closing. Let's close this up. I'm almost at the market, right? I've been talking for 10 minutes. So the question is, all right, there's all these great things out there I want to run games in. There's nothing saying I can't, right? As long as I don't try and publish it. But what do I do when I run into somebody who knows more about Star Wars, Middle-earth, Marvel, Battlestar Galactica than I do? How do I create a thrilling action role-playing story in the Middle-earth universe where this guy who knows more about Middle-earth than I do will feel like, wow, the stuff I know is actually coming into play, but also he won't constantly be second-guessing you. No, actually, in Mordor in that day, there were 57 orcs, and we've only killed 52. You know, that guy, or girl. I'm not saying there's not that the know-it-all girl isn't out there either. I would definitely say that my dearly departed friend generally knew more about it than I did when we talk Star Wars. So yeah, because there's huge gaps in time, there's huge gaps in location where we as the audience know very little of till nothing of what's going on. I mean, once you travel past Mordor and go further in that direction, what's there? Once you head east and get past like the lands of the Harad into wherever the Blue Wizards went, what's there? What's going on there? We don't know. What was going on there 150 years ago? What was going on there during the Second Age? Don't know. It's open 10 billion planets in that Star Wars galaxy. They've explored 4. There's 100 stories you could tell in Star Wars without ever once running into or worrying about affecting the main storyline. And then for like a surprise, for like, you know, the 100th adventure, or for like the Christmas adventure or whatever, bam, they run into a major Star Wars character. You know, my last Star Wars game for the 10th episode, they ran into Ahsoka. So yeah, that's there. There's nothing. Nobody can say you can't run a Star Wars game. You can't run a Middle Earth game. Of course you can. And of course you can create stuff in those empty pockets that have nothing to do with the canon. You know, it's like, hey, this adventure takes place 20 years before Bilbo left, dude. So it doesn't affect the Bilbo storyline at all. And if none of those works, thankfully, there's a brand new word in our DM arsenal that we can use, and that's multiverse. If every other attempt to create a unique adventure in this established universe fails, you could always say, hey, this takes place in a different timeline. Multiverse, and then they gotta be like, well, okay. And again, if after running the adventure you think, wow, this is really good, I think people would want to play it, and you want a third-party publish it, well, a day's worth of research would probably let you know whether you can or you can't, and what the rules are for running and printing a game in that established universe. Who owns the rights to Star Wars, the role-playing game right now? Do they have a open source common core SRD that says, yes, as long as you do X, Y, and Z, you can make third-party content set in Star Wars, Middle Earth, Battlestar Galactica, McDonald's, whatever. Don't be afraid. If you want to step away from D&D and want to explore other worlds, starting with an established IP to mess around with might be a good way to start, because, you know, a lot of the work's already been done for you. Tons of web pages dedicated to Star Wars and Middle Earth. There's tons of people out there who know about Star Wars and Middle Earth and all those other established IPs. So a lot of the work's been done for you already. All you got to do is make your Star Wars story, your Middle Earth story, your Marvel Universe story, your Battlestar Galactica story unique to you and unique to your players, so when they do stuff, they feel like what they're doing actually matters. Okay, well, we can't change the eventual outcome, but we can change stuff leading up to the eventual outcome and maybe tweak the eventual outcome a little bit, you know, as long as they get to Mordor with the ring. Then yeah, it's fine. I think that's what I'm trying to say is, yeah, it's fine. Anyways, what do you think? If you were going to step away from D20 fantasy and run another established universe, what would it be? I've run Star Wars, I've run Middle Earth. I'd probably do like something stupid like Super Sentai or the 5-year gap in Marvel between the snap and the blip. What was going on there? You know, if I was going to run a MCU universe, that's probably the one I'd run. So yeah, let me know what you're thinking. We're almost at our location. Hopefully you appreciate this. Hopefully it works. See ya. All right, how do I stop? How do I stop? How do I stop this? This?